Go for it.
Yahuwah, you are great, mighty, and awesome. Father, thank you for bringing us together today. Father, we thank you that you're doing great things in this earth. Father, thank you for your language. Thank you, Father, for bringing Eric in these conditions, Father, with the weather being as cold as it is. I ask you, Father, to protect all those who are in the deep freeze. Father, the elderly and the homeless, Father, I ask you to please watch over them. I ask you, Father, to minister, Father, to all who will hear your message today. It's in your great and mighty name I pray. Amen.
Amen. You know, we've talked about this before a bit, but someone brought up this point on the internet. Hey, Mark, that God loves everybody. And the question is, well, does Yahuwah himself really love everybody? I mean, he loves, let's say, mankind, human. Then people take those words and they spin them, so we got to be careful what words we use. But the question is, who does he really love? Who do you love? Who does he love? So part of, I might even say a big part of this whole study, on the one hand, is who do you love? Who is it that we as human beings, as atoms, who are we referencing when we think of the Almighty, the Most High? Those are kind of descriptive titles, but they're, and you know, we're talking about these this chart again. People can find this. Sorry, this is up on the internet, eriktology.net. If you hit articles, this is names, and then it has names in English. The translation of these words, you can download it if you'd like, or reference it there. Easier to see than me trying to hold something up. But anyway, the concept of name is the word Shem in Hebrew, spelled Shin Mem, and Shin Mem means place, here or there. It's translated all three of those ways, as well as meaning name, which is also fame, renown, reputation. And so the idea is, when it says, is it Job or something? Do you know his name, and do you know his son's name? Or what is his name? What is his son's name? I don't believe so much that I say, oh yes, it's Yahweh or Yahuwah or Yahvah or whatever. Do you know how to pronounce the four letters? Or is it, oh yes, his son is Jesus? No, it's Israel. Well, no, wait a minute. Didn't he say Ephraim was his firstborn? Yesharel, his firstborn, he said to Pharaoh. Yeshua, his firstborn, only begotten, or Yahusha. I mean, but the word Shem meaning place, his disposition. So the word Ruach in Klein's dictionary literally means expanse, mind, will, even the word courage. So if you take your disposition or your position, Shem, position, what's your disposition? How think of a dog on a leash. How far can he go before the leash holds him back? It's kind of a disposition. Here's your position, and you're allowed to take it this far, and any further, you're not going there. So the question is, who is Yod He Vav He, or Aleph He Yod He Ehyeh? Some people say his name's not Yahweh at all. It's Ehyeh or Ayah, depending on how you want to pronounce in Exodus 3 at the burning bush. My determination is that you don't even know how to pronounce or what those scribblings of those four letters, in either case, Ehyeh or Yahweh, you don't know what they mean. You don't know what they are. You don't know how to pronounce them. You don't know why he would have chosen those four letters unless he had first planned the letters, planned the positioning in the chronological sequence, and that because Suffering, connecting the dots to tell a story, every one of those letters is like a stepping stone along a path, a very particular trail, like a garden path, you might say, from describing a narrative, which is another way of saying a storyboard, from the beginning to the end, the first to the last, the Aleph to the Tav. So taking all these things in mind, I could say, well, words are spelled not haphazardly randomly, but in particular. And even in Klein's dictionary, every once in a while, rather often actually, it'll say, oh, this particular word spelled this way was coined by so-and-so at such a time, a certain year. And you could say, what does that mean? I think the word is pneumatics or pneumastics or NUM. It means to stamp a coin. It means to print and say, this is what this is, official currency, pneumastics or something. Anyway, the point about that is that when you coin a phrase, you're saying, okay, from now on, this is what this means. It's like, well, who gives that guy? Typically in Klein's dictionary, it'll be a rabbi because it's Hebrew words, but who gets to decide what words mean? I mean, who came up with the word carburetor? Well, before there was engines, internal combustion engines, did anybody have a carburetor? Did anybody need a carburetor? Well, carburetor means one who does something. It's like ending a word with the letter noon, or even beginning with a noon or a mem. It's one who does something. Carburetor. You're carbureting? Well, what are you doing? In English and Latin and Greek, this is simply the way language works. You compose or build words based on what pieces of words mean. I was talking to somebody the other day. I think they said it was tokenizing or something like that, where you basically break down a language, any language, into pieces. Verb roots, the Semitic language group, you'll see in an encyclopedia, is 3-letter verb roots. And you can say, well, but there's a lot of words with 2 letters, like ya, yod, hey, or heart, lamed bet. Well, but there's a 3-letter lamed bet, but it can break down to 2-letter lamed bet, heart, love, or pronounced love. But why those 2 letters? Because of what the individual letters mean. That's just all there is to it. It just is. It's a given. From back when? Well, when did the language get composed? Well, at least we have since this Tower of Babel, but before that, all the world spoke one language. Who gave it to them? Elohim, the creator, who made Adam, communicated with Adam, told Adam, don't eat of the fruit of that one tree, built Adam's brain to engage communication with language. He had to give him something. Adam's first job was to name the animals. Did Adam just go, well, that's the name of that one. That's the name of that one. That's the name of that one. Or did he just make up sounds and, let's draw squiggles that will reference those sounds? Or was he using intellect and wisdom that he was imparted with? He was given that basic software programming, you might say, in his mind, in his nephesh, in his ruach. See, if ruach is mind, so is nefesh. So what's the difference? Or even nasham. There's different words. I think there was 6 or 7 different words in Hebrew that means basically mind. So in, I think it's the book of Philippians, it says, the New Testament says, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. What's he saying? Let this spirit be in you, which was also in Yahusha, the Mashiach. Well, he wasn't known as Yahusha Mashiach. The word Mashiach is written in Hebrew, mem, shin, yod, chet. And if you look at the word shin, het, or shin, yod, het, or shin, vav, het, break it down to shin, het, because yods and vavs can be thrown in, taken out like wild cards. It means to swim, a swimmer, to drop down into a pool of water. In fact, a mem shin het or shin yod het, if shin het means to swim and mem is the place, then mem shin het or mem shin yod het could be a pool of water, a ditch on the side of the road where you jump down in or How's that a Messiah? Anointed with water or oil, but it also means to converse, to talk, to have communication. So if Shin Yod Het is to talk or converse, Mem Shin Yod Het, Mashiach, is the one who converses. Or Mem Shin, the first two letters, mush, where we in English get the word mushy, it's to feel or touch. So what I look at that is say, well, if Mem is the one who, or the place where, or that occasion provided for doing the task, and if the task is conversation or communication, and if Mem Shin can also be to feel or touch, that's to be tangible touch, then Yahusha came here, the Messiah, HaMashiach, is not just the anointed or the swimmer, came down here to swim in this place of water. It's the graspable, touchable communication. The Word in flesh, in the flesh of Adam. The Word. What Word? The Ruach of Elohim is this expanse. In the book of Revelation, I think it says 3 different times, then plus previously, might have been the book of Isaiah, but Yahuwah claims to be the Aleph and Tav, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Well, that's like the equivalent. When I say it's like, he didn't say that I can read Aleph and Tav in the book of Revelation because I see it in English. It came out of Greek or maybe Aramaic, but he did say Aleph and Tav in the Tanakh, in the Old Testament. If he's the Aleph and Tav, he determined that reference of himself. And then if he says the first and last, beginning and the end, he's equating the Aleph to the first and the beginning, and the Tav to the last and the end, the Tav. But the word Aleph means ox. Aleph also references strength. Aleph is the number 1 or the number 1,000. So it's this, the number 1 is the singularity of being without compromise, without discussion, without controversy. But 1,000 is a group of 1,000 to be, you might think pictorially, graphically, unmovable, unshakable, unrattling. There's a certain solid, just 1,000. We take the word 1,000 as a concept. So there was somebody recently on the internet who made this bold statement of truth. Anybody who talks about the meaning of Hebrew letters is doing witchcraft. Who comes up with this stuff? Wherever he got his information, I would say he's completely wrong. And if he maintains, yes, whoever talks about the meaning of letters is doing witchcraft, well, the scripture says anybody doing witchcraft should be put to death. So this man, whoever this is, or person, lady, whatever it is taking the position somehow by their own authority to say, I'm now determining that any of us looking at the meaning of letters should be killed, put to death. Well, I could think of a whole string of descriptive adjectives to call him names. Idiot, fool, arrogant. Those are the nice ones. And it's like, where do you get your information? Apparently, he's not even reading Aleph and Tav means beginning or first. That's the meaning. Aleph means ox. That's the word ox. Bet means house. That's the meaning of the word bet is house. Gimel is camel. Dalet is door. Dalet also means to hang down. My point is, if anybody doesn't like discussing that letters mean things, by which words are composed, by which Adam then was capable of inventing, coining. By the way, your microphone's open there. There you go. That if Adam wasn't given any clue as to the meaning of letters, he would not have composed the words to name the animals and everything else that we have on the face of the earth. If you think about it, you look around in our language, human Adam language is all descriptions. That's all it is. Every word describes an animal, or an object, mountain, tree, water, lake, or it's an adjective or a verb, green, hot, cold, or it's a position, near, far, next to, until, when, while. It's like every single word in our vocabulary means something by which we can communicate what's going on in here to somebody out there. It just so happens that that's the essence of the meaning of the letters mem and noon, which just so happens to be where we are on the chart today. This chart here, we had just gotten through Lamed. I'll address that again. The idea that mayim, the word mayim, is water. Yeah, but this is a mem, not a mayim. Mem, yod mem is how you spell water, but you can also spell water yod mem. It means sea, S-E-A, place of water. Yod mem, well, if yod mem is plural, you'd think that yod mem meant seas, multiple waters, but it actually means multiple days. Yod vav mem, yom means day. Well, why is the word day and water almost the same word, especially if you could drop in yods and vavs or take them out? Then yod mem and yod vav mem should be essentially the same, but yod mem is sea, S-E-A, and yod vav mem is day. I don't see a correlation. Well, I could try to imagine an overlap somehow. And then if you say yod mem, which should be seas, like the 7 seas. See, if I start pondering, that's the objective. If I start thinking about it, because something either makes sense or something doesn't make sense. And as we were saying last week, the idea of navigating, of meditating, of pondering doesn't necessarily have to be specific on a trajectory of this beginning place and that destination of Aleph to Tav. I can just meander, wander. A bird flits by and woo, takes my thoughts with him. And then I have a different perspective than where I was. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a little different than what Yahuwah did when he says Aleph to Tav. So Aleph, see, if you associate these words to behaviors, if Aleph means ox, what's the difference between an ox and a bull, or a bull and a steer, or a bull and a cow, or some kind of buffalo? They all kind of look bovine, and Aleph is generally referred to as divine. It's like, what's that association? Why did the children of Israel make a golden calf, not even a bull, Mount Sinai? There's something about that creature, the bull, the calf, the bovine, which Adam somehow associates with deity. Why? Because it means strong, like 1,000. We rate the power of a vehicle in horsepower, because horses run and horses pull things, but oxes are generally stronger than horses. Maybe strength is rated in ox power. Speed maybe in horsepower. I'm just thinking. My point is, I was kind of scoffed at one time. You can't tell me that every time you see a letter Aleph, it's talking about an ox. Nobody ever said that. But there's some essence of an ox, whether it's strength or masses. A mass of 1,000 men could pull as much as one ox, that concept. But people associate it with Elohim. Look at esoteric Jewish writing. They do it all the time. Aleph is associated with Elohim. Aleph is the one silent letter. The word Bereshit, the first word of the first book, the first verse starts with the letter Bet. It means, as a prefix letter, in, on, with, among, through, against, or in the condition of. Rashid, it's translated Genesis, or in the beginning. In the beginning. Word the isn't there. Rosh would be beginning, or that's the first, that's the head, that's the chief, that's the foundation, it's the pinnacle. So Rosh would be at the pinnacle in the beginning when there was a foundation established. So to sit there and say, well, we're looking at words and decomposing them so that we can tell what they mean. That's not witchcraft. Now, witches might do that. Yeah, but so do engineers, so do scholars, so do archaeologists. Just to say, a couple of the world's most renowned linguistic authorities, Michael Heiser, Michael Brown, Miles Jones, who's validated by Michael Rood and a bunch of other people in his book, The Writing of God, they all vouch that the meaning of the letters is nothing. It's void, it's nil, it's not. Okay, that's their perspective. I think they're completely wrong. So you can believe whatever you choose to believe. If you choose to believe looking at letters is witchcraft, don't do it, because if in your heart it's witchcraft, Yahuwah said, don't suffer a witch to live. Well, that was a decree to the people, or is that to the nation? I'm not suggesting anybody goes out there and terminates the existence of people in their neighborhood because of certain behaviors, but Yahuwah certainly said certain things along those lines. Nothing about this study has anything to do with magic or sorcery or witchcraft or the occult. If you associate the occult with satanic, luciferic illumination, has nothing to do with that. The word occult has to do with, like the word ocular, what is able to be seen, and thusly it's counter that which is not seen, so that which is invisible. Radio waves are occult because you can't see them. You can see the effect if you turn on your radio or run a remote controlled vehicle. What do the words mean? So if I say that the entire Hebrew alphabet is self-referential, then I could say if the alphabet was the mind of Elohim, the disposition, the regard between Aleph and Tav at the very beginning, and he invented some word, as in John 1:1, in the beginning was the word, and the word was with Elohim, and was the existence. The existence of Elohim is referenced by this word. It's the Ehyeh, Aleph Hey Yod Hey, Yod Hey Vav Hey. Yod Hey Yod, Hey Yod Hey, Hey Vav Hey. That's all the verb to exist. So, and the word was, is it past tense? Is it just tense of being? The word is being. Well, that's the Alephness. So Aleph is beingness, and then without substance, because bet is substance, is to put in noun format, body, house. That's why bet is a house. So to sit here and say, well, these concepts that are embedded within the Aleph Bet were his original idea, which he gave to Adam, so Adam could communicate with him, name the animals, and communicate with other atoms. So I heard it once say, there was some Christian preacher who said, it was actually, might have been Jesse Duplantis, said, man is a speaking spirit. Okay. So if we're spirits given a body, we're Alephs given a bet, and we've been programmed, or our mind is wired for speaking. It's all about communication. So you could say, well, the maintenance of the body, food and cleanliness and transportation and shelter and got to work, so the ability, I mean, that's all just to facilitate the being of the body, which means, is it man's chief pursuit on the face of the earth speaking language, communication? Is that the primary? That's the Rosh, that's the pinnacle of all pursuits, behaviors. At least that one preacher said so. And then Isaac Moseson's book, The Origin of Speeches. In speaking with him, when I communicated with Isaac Moseson, he said he hated this paleo stuff, but I highly recommend his brilliant mind. Wrote a book called The Word, showing like 20,000 English words coming right out of Hebrew, and he can see in a couple hundred different languages how they all came right out of Hebrew. The Origin of Speeches tells you 7 basic ways that the tongue turns things around, where Hebrew becomes these other languages. The Babel after the Tower of Babel. The Babel after Babel is twisted, permutated Hebrew. But this idea that if everything is self-referential, then I could say how to read the alphabet should be mapped by the alphabet itself. Who is Elohim should be in the alphabet itself. Who is the Mashiach should be in the alphabet itself. What is Adam, and what does Adam's life look like, and what is Israel, and what does Israel's narrative story look like? It's all in the alphabet. All I have to do to read the alphabet is come up with a question. What is the Westminster Confession of Faith? What is the chief end of man? Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. From, I think it was the 1600s or 1500s Presbyterian Catechism, Westminster Confession of Faith. I remember that one from learning as a kid. Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Could I find that answer if looking in the alphabet? If I looked at the alphabet and say, if the alphabet is describing the true Elohim, then who's the Aleph? His being. His who? Bet, creator of heaven and earth. Bet is to put this place here. And we've done this before. We could do it again if you want. But I'd sit there and the hours pondering, looking at every letter. If he decided there's 22 factors in the overall communication, 22 variables in the equation. Each variable means something different, but the factor in chronological order, each one is tied to the previous and the one coming next, because that's the way it's designed. Those who say the letters mean nothing would disagree with that statement. They'd say, no, it's just a random collection of symbols, meaning nothing. Take 22 different things, throw them up in the air, let them fall randomly on the floor, associate them and say, that's the order. What does it mean? Well, that's how you spell words, but according to the voice of authority, the academia scholars, they mean nothing. Just so you know, if you then pursue this line of thinking, studying the alphabet, studying the engineering of the language, it puts you as your own authority. You're outside the box. You can't be qualified by one of them. And if they say, hey, you study in our schools and we'll give you letters after your name, well, you can't go to one of their schools and study what is outside the jurisdiction of what's allowed. They're not going to give you letters after the name. They'll scorn you and beat you up and blaspheme your name publicly. Just so you know, if you want to pursue this stuff, you're on your own, or others of your ilk, if you can find them. But the idea that I could say Adam was made in Elohim's image, and if I can read the 22 letters as somehow describing what is the chief end of Adam, end meaning purpose, meaning completeness. End can mean cutting off, but end can mean filling to the full, which is the word kaf lamed. Or even shalom is the word complete. But if I say Adam was made in Elohim's image, and Elohim gave of himself this reference of these 22 letters, so Adam can find himself in the 22 letters. But we have to know what the 22 letters mean. Is it to Adam to just arbitrarily make stuff up? Well, in the orthography, in the shape of the letters, they are drawn a certain way. So I discussed before, picked this set of these 22 shapes, which are authentically old. They're just not authentically necessarily found in this compilation. I picked the most ancient letters I could find, not the most ancient, but from all the most ancient letters, shapes I could find. I picked the letter shapes which I personally, subjectively, artistic license, felt with my subjective analysis to be the most adequate, beneficial, because of its shape, to express the best voice of what that letter was actually saying. So with the letter mem, I could have just used a zigzag, but I used a wave action because there's an undertow and then this crashing wave looked more chaotic than just a little zigzag of rippled water. Chaotic, there's two voices in that mem. There's this undertow of a wave that you surf on, shooting the tube, but then there's this crashing. So there's this energy within and then the surface foam. The word surfeited is where we get the word surf, which is the number 7, Shin Bet Ayin, means surfeit. It means complete, overflowing, satisfied, having fulfilled the purpose. So to look at a wave, I'm trying to draw it like this on purpose because there's this undertow, the curl, and then the foam crashing down on top. That's why I draw the Paleo Mem with a zigzag and this undertow. Because of that picture. Hieroglyphically, they found in Egypt the little zigzag. And hey, some of the writings of the Hebrew letters were a zigzag, so the Hebrews must have got it from the Egyptians. It might have been vice versa. The Egyptian hieroglyphics might have come out of the original language. Did they just draw the zigzag and they kept off the undertow on purpose because it was simpler, easier, or they didn't care? Well, I care, so I'm going to draw it this way, just so you know. So if mayim is mem, which simply means water. So Frank Seekins, in his book Hebrew Word Pictures, talks about mayim means chaos. Chaos. Well, turbulent crashing wave is certainly a chaotic event. Is a swelling wave chaos? No. Well, chaos is coming. Water itself is not chaotic. Water can telegraph chaos. If water is disturbed, is water to be blamed for the chaos, or water causes chaos when it gets where it shouldn't be, like in England, or when water freezes and everything gets frozen? You know, in England, Paul was just saying how things were flooding in certain places. See, again, if I say water is chaotic, based on what? Sometimes in certain events, water can be chaotic. A gently falling rain or a mist of dew can be a beautiful thing, which is the opposite of chaotic. So when Frank Seekins, in his Hebrew Word Pictures book, uses as this little ditty, Shalom, Shin Lamed Vav Mem. If Shin means destruction, of violent teeth, Lamed, authority, Vav, establishes, and Mem, chaos. So you can read the word Shalom, Shin Lamed Vav Mem, as destroy the authority that establishes chaos. That's right, bind the devil, and you'll have peace. Well, okay, that's one way to read it. But I could say the Shin is the monogram of El Shaddai. El Shaddai. You see the letter Shin. Lamed. His being our shepherd. Vav is connection, which means he brings us to or allows us, and Mem is pure, clean, still waters. So El Shaddai, our shepherd, leads us to still waters. That's also shalom. Just as easily as it is what Frank Seekins said. But I could look at Shin and say, Shin can mean teeth or fire, that which consumes. But is that consuming like you're consuming, that you have a provision of food? Being provided, Lamed. Well, but if I say Lamed is the teaching of the Torah, El Shaddai provides the teaching of the Torah. Vav is a connector like a nail. Well, Yeshua was crucified. He was the Vav. He was the man, and the man, 6th letter, Vav, number 6. Nowhere does it say Vav means man, but man was created on the sixth day, as some people say. So are the animals. Is the Vav a penguin? Penguins were made on the day 6, unless they're a bird, in which case they'd been on day 5. Gosh, which is it? When were penguins made? Day 5 or day 6? A bird which swims. Fish and birds were made on day 5. Rats. Now I'm not sure which. Well, rats. Vav could mean rats. Rats were certainly made on day 6. See, what logic are you using for pinning what? Vav is a connector. Some people draw the Vav with a kind of a U shape and then down and then a line going through it. And it's like, that's a Vav? I draw it with a cup and a straight cup because it's shaped like a chalice, something you might drink out of. Or drawn like a bridge across here. What's down the middle? I could draw a picture of a stream, 2 earth banks, and a swayed bridge. And there, that looks kind of like the Vav. The idea that a Vav connects 2 things together. Lamad's an authority. Lamad means teach and learn. Lamed is drawn as a shepherd's staff. If Sheen can mean fire, which consumes, and Mem can mean water, does it say that fire has a greater authority in comparison to water? Depends on the circumstances. Water can quench fire, but fire can evaporate water. If water quenches fire, fire's done. But when fire goes to quench or evaporate the water still exists, just in a different form. So water has a greater authority than the fire. Yeah. So which way do you read it? I'm just saying, if you let your mind just ponder, it's not a matter of right or wrong. It's a matter of pondering or meditating on what? Again, if I say every single word, what does that mean? Well, single, individual word. I can say every single word is a picture of something that atoms engage on the face of the earth. Every word of every sentence is engineered. And the spelling of every word is engineered. Our whole life is about these words. And then to compare English with Greek, with Latin, with Hebrew, throw in French, Spanish, German, Russian, Chinese, I mean, even samurai, Japanese, that's a Hebrew word, Shin Mem Resh Yod. To make language your sport. I believe it to be the sport of the kingdom of heaven. Yahuwah Elohim invented this game. Call it a game. So for anyone to take the time pondering, as I was trying to say last week, it's time well spent. It's not a waste of time. It's not just daydreaming off in some la land and, hey, get busy, you're supposed to be doing something important. It's like, well, this is to think about language, and specifically to think, well, Elohim, who is he? The letter's silent. I don't know. He's invisible. He's up there somewhere, wherever he is, whatever, up or down or side. I don't know wherever he is. Maybe it's another dimension. Maybe it's not up at all. We just seem to have this reference of up. But if I looked at the Bible verse, it says, the heavens declare the glory of Elohim, and everything he built on earth displays his handiwork. And if I looked at the letter Bet as being then everything within the heavens and the earth, which are a manifest of his Aleph intention, then as a scientist, I can look at everything that exists and say, what's that saying? From what I understand, was it George Washington Carver? What was the guy's name? Some guy that lived in the South, right in the days of slavery, a black guy, but he was a bit of a scientist, and he was apparently asking, show me the mysteries of the universe. And the answer was, I'm not going to show you the mystery of the universe, but I'll show you the mystery in the peanut. And so he started studying peanuts. Apparently this guy, I forget his name. I think that might have been his name. Anyway, the point is, he found like 200 uses of a peanut. He was a believer, a Christian man, and went down on record as being one of the smartest guys of that era. But what I'm saying, and I say that because it was very noteworthy that at the time, that race of that people was considered to be savage, animalist, bestial, and not even human, with no regard. Same as the attitude in that era of the Native Americans. People have this way of dissing other people groups to give themselves esteem, as if what you do with your life isn't what gives you esteem. You got to somehow classify yourself by some other description that you had nothing to do with. Type of insanity there. What I'm saying is that this particular man studied the peanut for how many hours, as well as his other plants, finding 200 uses, and gave glory and credit to the creator of the universe. So by looking at the bet, he glorified the Aleph as the one who had made the bet, the object. Is that witchcraft? For someone to say that the alphabetic letters refer to their own selves, then I could sit there and say, well, let me look at Mem, Nun, Samek. Mem, there's this undertow. Mem is water, but it's also a picture of a womb. And in the Mishkan pattern, it's a laver, L-A-V-A-R, lavar. Well, L-A-V-E-R, laver. That's a basin of like a pool of water, drawn like the picture of the Vav. But lavar, L-A-V-A-R, in Spanish means to wash. And the B and the V are two letters which sound alike quite often. A B is pronounced as a V, not that a V is pronounced as a B. But that where you get the word lamed bet, meaning heart, or it's pronounced love. Is it laba? Love, lava. Lava is that molten rock. Lava also in Hebrew means to be inflamed or to be heartened from within. So if you start looking at these words, lamed bet bet, bet bet is a gateway entrance, so that what's in your heart is lamed bet bet. Your heart itself, lamed bet, but it's what's within you. That's like this undertow. And then what's evident on the surface, the crashing water. The word love is Aleph Hey Bet. Hey Bet means to give. So what you give is the manifest, like the wave action, the surf of what's in your heart. As you're pondering these words, all these things just start finding their place. Like if you were to take a jigsaw puzzle and throw it in the air and let it fall on the ground and stare at it long enough, pondering, all these pieces start moving, and almost like they're magnetically attracted to lock in where they go. And you'll see that the whole thing just assembles. Kind of assembles all by itself. You got to use your mind to think about it, though. But it all kind of works. It all kind of just happens. That the truth, the reality is in this alphabet. But what I'm saying about the alphabet describing the alphabet is that if I say the essence of what's within every letter, pictured by Mem, the essence of what it really is, has an inner heart and this manifest, which is expressed as Nun. See, so Nun is pictured as a fish that lives in the water. Fish is not the water. The fish lives in the water. And everything that the fish becomes, they say you are what you eat. Well, what's it eating? Whatever's in the water. Unless somebody throws something from the top surface, bugs or fish food or something. But otherwise, it eats what's in the water. So from the water, it consumes what's in the water, and the fish gets bigger. Then the fish jumps out of the water or gets fished out of the water. And now the fish is over here, its own thing, and the water's still here. So the water is a place. The water is a womb. The water is a petri dish. The water is a laboratory. So lavar and laboratory. So I can picture the Mem like the laver, like this laboratory. And the Nun then is the object in the dish, the fish in the pond, the baby in the womb, which gestates or incubates there until a certain point that it's ready and then jumps out. So if I was to then say, well, the alphabetic sequence, these 22 letters are a reference of the alphabet, there's something about the real essence of each letter, which just is, but then it also can jump out. How does it jump out? Look at the letter Samek. In the Paleo, 3 horizontal lines and a vertical. Well, that looks like a skeleton, a backbone with ribs, a tree trunk with branches. It's an engineered structure. It's a trellis. It's a power pole, main pole with yard arms like a ship. But I could say, well, if that's the skeletal structure, that's essentially the same as saying orthography. So I could read mem nun samek as the meaning, the mem, the real essence of the letter, which jumps out. It's expressed as orthography. Then the next letter ayin, it's like, oh, there, I can weigh, balance, measure that, because the word ayin literally means balance exactly, weigh carefully, measure meticulously, deliberate with scrutiny, calculate, yes, use your head. Look at that and figure it out. And then the way that the letter ayin is drawn with this circle with the dot, like the eyeball with the pupil, the fruit with the seed. That's why I draw the ayin. Is that not just a round circle? Because the way I draw it, and it's actually open, it's not even connected necessarily. It's almost like the animal in the corral. It's like, what's the heart of the matter? If the whole fruit is the matter, what's the heart of the matter? What's the pupil of the eye? What's the main point? What's the noon in the mem? So drawing the ayin is another picture of the mem with the noon in it. And then the next letter pei is drawn as a mouth. Some people draw it as a front, this kind of shape, almost like an eyeball shape. But if you draw it sideways, it means that which opens. Anything can open. You could take a walnut and hit it with a hammer and it'll open. Oh, that must be the pei. A river running down in a continent all of a sudden opens up to the sea. At the delta, the place where the water of the river engages the sea, that's the pei. If you think the letters don't mean anything, and all of a sudden you say, okay, I'm willing to acknowledge that the letters might mean something. Oh, that's a pei. There's an opening there. Pei is anything that opens. It's drawn, typified as a mouth, because a mouth, by design, opens. By definition. It could be anything that opens. So you look at the narrative story of the gospel, Yahusha, he was thrown into the tomb. That's a chet, round rock, happened to be rolled. In that era, that's what they did. They rounded a big round rock in front of the grave. So I can look at chet, tet, and it was big pin was stuck in it. There's the yod holding it shut, and Yeshua even said, nobody takes my life. I lay it down, and I'm doing this of my own strength, my own yod, my own effort and power to prevail. Yod Kaf Lamed means to have the power to prevail and contain it all. He's doing this to run the storyline. And then so pei zadi, pronounced pizza, literally means open mouth. So there's something about the zadi shape, this flourishing, like Aaron's rod that budded. So I see, if I know the meanings of these letters, if I know the Bible stories, and some people haven't read the Bible. I know some people that have never read the Old Testament, so they don't know Aaron's rod that budded. That's a foreign concept. Might have well described something that happened on the planet Mars. They don't know. But yeah, there's a story that Aaron's staff, his lamed, a collection of all these other dozen, they wanted to see, would Elohim choose which guy should be the high priest? And that they all threw their staff in this pile, and they came back the next day, and Aaron's rod had budded. It was a dead stick. He'd had it for how many years? And overnight, it said it branched, it put out leaves, it put out blossoms and fruit. It's like, you don't get all those things in one day. That takes season of time. You don't get fruit and blossom and leaf but his shepherd's staff, his walking stick, did do that overnight. Picture of Aaron's rod that budded. That's a picture of the letter Zodi. So I specifically draw the letter Zodi as that vertical with that sprout. It looks almost like our Arabic number 2 is what it's called. Hook. But because it also is a fish hook, means a few different things, but I could see that sprouting, the miraculous sprouting designated this one. When you look in the narrative sequence, Pei Zodi, he opened his mouth, the blossoming mouth, the specified mouth. It's got to be Hebrew, the Ivrit. And so when Yeshua said he went up to the mountain seeing the multitudes, he sat down and he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, that's Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount. He opened his mouth. That phrase, he opened his mouth. See, that's English. That's King James. But when I studied Hebrew, I realized that's the word Pei Zodi right there, Pei Zodi. He opened his mouth. And you don't normally say that. Oh, yeah, he opened his mouth. And it's like, duh, of course he opened his mouth if he went to teach. You just don't say that. So for it to say that is intentionally drawing our attention to the natural order of the alphabet right there, those 2 letters, Pei Zodi. So if Yeshua goes up on the mountain, sits down, opens his mouth, Pei Zodi, and teaches them in Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, Matthew 5, which happens to also fit the Mishkan pattern. But I could say it's Ayin Pei Zodi. So not only is it open mouth, but it's ayoning. It's deliberating, evaluating, weighing, measuring the open mouth. Well, that's what this whole study is, because the open mouth is Yahuwah's alphabet, his language. And I've had people tell me over the years, oh, God knows my heart. I don't need to sit here and study this stuff. And it's like, yeah, and there's scriptures that say the human heart is deceptively wicked. Who can know it? Well, he knows it. And he's already told us it's deceptively wicked. Then there's the question, yeah, but do we know his heart? Do we know his heart? Oh, yes, my God would never hold me responsible for doing this and that. Only the Elohim Yahweh of the scriptures does hold people responsible. I remember hearing my whole life, on Judgment Day, it's not a matter of what you do. You can do nothing. Everything you do is as filthy rags. It's whether you believe in Jesus. If you ask Jesus in your heart, then you're accepted. Yeah, but I can show you in the book of Revelation where he says we're going to be held accountable for what we do. Just look at what John wrote concerning what Yeshua told him about the 7 churches. Do what I told you to do. Do your first deeds of love. Do work. You better get busy. There's the book of deeds. There's the book of life. How many books is there? I don't even know, but there's the book of Malachi 3:16. Whoever talks about his stuff gets their name written in a certain book. You betcha about what we do, but yet we were told it is not what you do. Different God, I suppose. Yahuwah is certainly about us doing something. As a matter of fact, that word that I think I mentioned last week, Pei Kuf Dalet, P, PH, and F all are the letter Pei. Pei Kuf Dalet, we could just call it Fakada, PQD or FQD, Fakad. It means to be visited, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children and the grandchildren. It's in that phrase, but it means to be held responsible for what you were entrusted with. And if you hear that definition in the dictionary, and it's like, oh, because I read the New Testament, did very much in the past, I remember there's a couple accounts of Yeshua giving a parable about a wealthy man who's going on a journey. And so he leaves his stuff, wealth or whatever it might be, called talents, to 3 servants. To one he gave 5, the one he gives 3, the other he gives 1. And he goes on his journey, and then he comes back and he says, okay, I expected you to do something with what I entrusted you with. What did you do? Now that interface is exactly the definition of Pei Kuf Dalet. Visiting or holding responsible or passing in review. I also picture you remembered back in the 1960s, especially on May Day at the Kremlin in Moscow in Soviet Union, you'll have all the big shots, military and political, standing up on this wall, looking down, red square, and they pass the military. Big pageant. Everybody just perfect order, tanks and airplanes and trucks and cannons and soldiers, and it's like this beautiful parade. You'll see stuff like that on the internet from Korea and China. I mean, just the precision. Gosh, it's just astounding what these guys do. There's some American drill teams that do that sort of thing too. In fact, horns and drums, forget what it's called, but my nephew was in one of these here in Oregon years ago. I can't understand how they can memorize their field positions, the playing the music, the perfect looking of every turn of the head, perfectly synchronized, going on for such a long time. It's like Adam's mind and memory for precision. He was so incredibly built. It's astounding. Yet do we use that to just express human nature? There's nothing wrong with that. Human interest. But to use everything we are to sit there and say, let's focus in on Yahuwah's communication for a while. What might we see? Well, that's what this study is. Imagine if you could take that military parade and say, when the chief executive, when the highest officer, military officer in the land says, okay, let me see how the troops have been training. What have you done with the military budget? Let me see the gear. Let me see the planes and the ships and just for a great display. Okay, but so when Yahuwah says to you, hey, what did you do with my language? Let me see what you've done with it. Did you think about it? Did you throw it aside? Did you say, nah, meaningless, who needs this? Or did you make it your own? And did you try to beautify it with your heart wrapped all around it and presented to you? Who? Present it to him, present it to one another. Like, to be able to see in his language the meaning of a word, the meaning of a phrase, the beautiful description, as Solomon said, apples of gold on platters of silver, a word fitly spoken. To be able to apprehend, to picture, to get the understanding and present it in such a way that you can hand it to another person is almost like cutting flowers and handing someone a bouquet. Just for the fun, for the temporary, for the, hey, look, here's something beautiful. We're going to take a break.